School Building Committee, 8/21/23 meeting to order. We have some members on Zoom, so we'll do roll call vote. Pat Tompkins, he's not, I don't think he's here yet. Sarah McLaughlin,
Here.
Kirk McCormick,
Here.
Greg Stepler,
Here.
Nancy Toomey,
Here.
John Coop,
Here.
Karen Gately Herrick,
Here.
Ed Ross.
Here.
Carla Nazaro here. We also have our town manager, our superintendent, our Reading Municipal Light, Tom Olala.
Olala.
Ooh la la.
Close,
Ooh la
Carla.
la. Ooh la la. Ooh la la. Okay, I'm gonna get this.
We have our Killam principal Lindsay on. Mike Carroll is on from our OPM. And Joe Huggins and Kevin Kabuzzi from facilities, I think, and Jackie, right? I think I got everyone. So just a quick review of the agenda. What was that? Oh, and Derek. Hi, Derek. We're gonna talk about review the designer selection schedule and process. We're gonna talk about our draft request for services from the designer. We'll talk about future meeting agenda items and approve our 8/7 meeting minutes. So we will start off, I probably should mention that we had, after our last meeting on the 7th, we had our OPM kickoff meeting at Killam on that Wednesday, the 9th. It went very well. I think we were able to share a lot of information with Mike and Susanna about our project. They were able to see the building, and that helped them to formulate the designer package as well. Let's talk about the designer selection schedule and process. So I misspoke at the last meeting. We were talking about that we chose a designer selection panel, a committee members, which is Nancy, Karen, myself, and Ed. And we were thinking that this was gonna follow the same process as our OPM review panel. And that is not the case. The MSBA has a very specific way to do this. And what they do is they choose, we send to the designer review panel, each district sends 3 representatives. And the, which they like to consist of the town manager, the superintendent, and a representative from the Killam Building Committee. And then they have 10 members from the MSBA. And what they like to do is they'd like to have that meeting as the group that decides who the designer is. We are going to our selective boards, so the select board is going to vote as to have our town manager as our representative for the committee, and the school committee at our next meeting is gonna vote to have the superintendent as our representative as well. So the role of our subcommittee is going to be to review the package, even though the entire committee is invited to review the designer request for services and submit comments. Our subcommittee will get together and review that package before it's sent out. But the actual interviews are done with the MSBA. Anything else, Fidel, that we should add to that?
I was just gonna add, we do expect the interviews will be a public process, so all of the committee is welcome to sign in as a member of the public, and also other members of the public of the school committee.
Absolutely. And this committee will also get copies of the submissions too, to review as well. Okay, so that was a little shift in what we thought our process was. And thank you to Colliers for helping to clarify that for us. So now everybody has received the draft request for services from the designer. We can open it up for discussion if people have specific comments now. We're asking that everybody submit by on or before Wednesday or before Wednesday?
Ish.
Ish early, ish late.
Wednesday, Thursday.
Oh, Wednesday, Thursday, okay, so by Wednesday or on Wednesday or earlier, if people could submit their comments to Jackie, she's gonna compile them and present them to Colliers.
Yeah, and if it's possible to do track changes, that way it's easier to combine. We just went through it with the Simon's Way exploratory committee.
Mike, Carol, do you have anything to add for that, with that?
Yes, just a couple of things if I could. One is just one quick little clarification. The MSBA has 13 members, and then there's our 3 that are added to that. So we're not part of that 13. It's a total of 16, if you will. It's 13 from them and 3 from us. And I do think that I maybe kind of started us down the wrong path last time, so I apologize. But other than that, I think you nailed it. The only other thing that I would like to maybe show, if you would like me to, is I could pull up a quick timeline of the items specific to that selection process, if that makes sense.
Great.
So I'm going to share my screen here if I can. Are you able to see that? That should be an email.
Yep.
I'm going to try and make it a little bit bigger here so it's easy to read. So the RFS, so the draft RFS is in everybody's hands, and that's what we're going to talk about here in a minute. We basically have to have that in the MSBA's hands by a week from Wednesday. And so I think that first turnaround being this Wednesday, Thursday, depending on how many comments we have and if there's any back and forth, that's why we're looking for that a little bit of extra time so that we can get that to the MSBA by August 30th. Then the next step would be to place an ad. We say the central register here, it's really the central register and the local paper as well. But if we get that into the central register by September 7th, the way that the central register works, you put the ad in basically the week before you need it to show up, and then it shows up the next week. So put it in by the 7th. That means we'll have it in the central register showing up for the 13th, which means that basically we could have that RFS out on the street, out to the designers by September 13th. We would then look to have the applications come back to the district on the 11th. The MSBA requires us basically within 1 week to get them their copies of that. And then we would be meeting with the MSBA on the 7th of November. What would happen at that point there is we would take that package. Let's just say we get 5 applications or 8 applications, whatever we get. We would reduce that down to a short list as part of that selection committee. So it would be the 16-member committee. Colliers will be there, but they're not going to want to hear from us. Carla got it just right. What the MSBA actually asks for us to do is provide the town manager, the superintendent of schools, and a member of the, a person from the school building committee or the school committee. Those are the 3 representatives they're looking for to represent you. One of the other keynotes here is that we're getting packages in on November 11th, and the expectation is that those 3 members would be reviewing those packages between November 11th and November 7th. At that same time, Colliers will be doing reference checks and things like that, not only for you folks, but also for the MSBA as well. And we'll be providing that. What the MSBA doesn't want us to do is actually I'll say meet as a group and discuss those. They want that discussion to happen as part of that selection board, if you will. So that would be on November 7th. Assuming everything goes smoothly, which I don't see any reason why it wouldn't, you would have that short list, and then we would be looking to potentially at the next meeting, which is the 27th of November, have the interviews. So it would be with that board twice. Right now, my understanding is that board is continuing to meet via Zoom, so it would be a virtual meeting. I do know that those were done in the past in person, but I don't believe that they're doing that right now. I think they're still doing virtual.
So Mike, just for clarification, the bids come back on
11th. And everybody's going to review them. Technically, we're not supposed to review them as a group,
That's correct.
but people can pass comments on to town manager or the superintendent?
I would think so. I would think from that perspective, if other members of the committee here are reviewing it and have comments or concerns, I wouldn't send them to all three members, but maybe you send them to the, the building committee chair, person, like if you're the one that's going to be representing the building committee, maybe they would send them all to you so that you could then compile those and bring those forward. Ultimately, the key here is that the three people from your committee that are going to be on that overall larger committee are the voice of the district. And that's the key point here, is that they want to have that voice, and the MSBA wants to hear that voice. And so we've got to be, we've got to have the people there that have the information. So it would be important for anybody here to share that information up to those three people, or,
So just to keep with.
The meeting law, right? It's okay for the committee to send information to Fidel and to the town manager. It's not okay for us as a committee to have a discussion with more than a quorum. So just keep that in mind when you're sharing information back. I'll be the representative for this committee. So just keep that in mind. And so that has to happen informally before the 19th. Well, before the 7th, truly. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Kind of different.
So Mike,
Everybody likes our process better.
Carl, can I ask this a
Sure.
quick question to Mike? So Mike, for the 7th, it's basically all applicants, are those actual interviews, or are they just reviewing the applications and coming up with the short list?
on the 7th, it would be reviewing them and reducing it down to that short list. That's correct. So we would not be doing interviews that day. So the applicants would not be present, if you will. It would be the 16-member selection board. Colliers will be there as well as support, if you will. So if Carla had a question or a comment and needed, some support, I would be there to help her, if you will, or Fidel, or whoever is there, I'd be there in support. But in general, the MSBA doesn't want the OPM to be the one to be the voice for the town or for the district. They want us to be there as support. And then after, so on the 7th, coming out of the 7th, we would have a short list of, say, 3 preferred designers, and then we would go back at the next available meeting, which more than likely is the 27th, and we would have that interview at that time, or those interviews at that time, and we would be hoping to come out of that meeting with our our low preferred that we would then negotiate with, very similar to what you do with the OPM.
So Mike, I have it in my schedule.
For November 21st being the designer selection, so the interviews.
Okay, I was actually asking that question, and
Yeah.
I think you might be right. So this was my email to the MSBA asking that question, and I think you may be right that they did come back with the 21st is the hard date. I was trying to find that email right before the meeting here, and I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't get that up.
Well, we have it in our calendars at least. So hopefully
We'll obviously make sure that that's the correct day.
And so, Mike, just getting back to the 7th again, so creating that short list with the 16-member committee. So from our perspective, we should have, kind of comments for all applicants, and to develop, kind of what we think our short list would be for the 7th, but have information on all applicants in case MSBA not challenge, like if there's any kind of conflict between what we think and what the MSBA thinks, correct?
Yeah, so I think the homework for the three members of our committee between the 11th and the 7th is to review all the packages and do just like you said, make their own shortlist. If it was me and me alone, this is the way I rank them. That's what I would do if I was in that position, is this is my, my number one, my number two, number three, right down the list. And the other thing that would be important is to understand is it really number one and number two, for example, or is it like 1 and 1A? Like, hey, I have two that are really, really good and neither one of them is good, or I have one that's far above everybody else. So each of the individual 3 people from your district should do that and have that in their mind, so that when they're going forward, if they think they have 3, a 1A, 1B, 1C, and any one of those 3 you're happy with, and that's one way to go forward with that project. But if you feel that there's one designer that's head and shoulders above the rest, then you're going to want to make that case during that selection board on the 7th.
And in that, just to kind of get a little bit of a window into that actual meeting, is there a lot of discussion where we get the 3-person committee on our side, or three representatives on our side, share the whys of it? Or is it just, is there a little bit of a window you can give us into how that meeting actually goes?
I can. So first and foremost, the RFS that you have, you do have the draft of that. As you go through that, you're going to notice that was done off an MSBA template. And there are certain sections that they allow us to adjust and I'll say customize, if you will. But there's a lot of it that is their language and their language. And part of that is so that this board can reasonably effectively go through this and have a consistency with the way they approach these, so that they're trying to be very uniform, that they don't do one board one way and another board another way. So you are going to go through that. You're going to be talking about the pros and cons, what you liked about firm A, what you didn't like about firm A, what you liked about firm B, what you didn't like. And it's really going around the room. And I think in general, what I've seen with that is people have, they give you the opportunity to get your information out, and they're going to do the same. And that's really the key, is that we don't have 3 members that just say, I'll kind of say, sit back and listen. It's important to listen, but it's also important to give your input as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Before we go, does anybody have any questions on the actual request for services? Mike, so it looks like you took a July, it was the document from MSBA was revised on July 2023, which I'm assuming is the most current template?
That's correct. Yeah, one of the things we try to do whenever we're doing this is we always go to the MSBA website and download the latest and greatest, because even though they don't change often, and when they change, they don't change substantially, they do, from time to time have adjustments.
And basically it's a template that is customizable, right? We'll customize it.
That's correct.
Okay.
And when we submit this to the MSBA, I showed the dates earlier that we're looking to submit this in about a week. What they look to do is they're not going to really comment a lot on the customized sections. They're going to make sure that we didn't change the other parts that we're not supposed to, basically.
Right. Is there any information that you are
Currently waiting on us for?
I don't believe so. I think the only question I guess I would have, I think when the OPM RFS went out, there was some questions during the process, and we had a couple of addendums. And what we've done is we've gone ahead and said we're going to include those addendums as part of the supplemental package here. So that way there we give it right up front. We're just trying to, learn from what we, the questions that were asked before, so we don't have those same questions. So we did go through and we did highlight some items in here specific to our project. We have the timelines in there, and those timelines coincide with the timelines I just showed on the estimate. I'm sorry, on the email just a minute ago. And in addition, we have what we're calling attachments F, G, H, I, and J which are the HERA report, the population and enrollment forecasted studies, the educational profile questionnaire, the design enrollment certification from the MSBA, and then the master planning report. So I think if there's any other documents that you have that you feel should be added to this, maybe that would be a question, but I think what we've done is we took the documents initially in the OPM report and then in the RFI, I'm sorry, in the request for information when we had the addendums, we took those documents and added those in as well. Other than that, I'm happy to go through this line by line with anybody. I think a couple of the details that I would get into maybe is we have affirmative action and minority business enterprise and women business enterprise goals on this project, and we've aligned those with the state goals. If there's anything specific with the town or with the school district that would be above and beyond that would exceed state goals, anything like that you have that through your procurement process that might be a little bit more stringent. I don't remember seeing anything out of the ordinary during the RFP for the OPM, but again, just asking the question, I guess, if there's anything out there.
So Fidel, it does say for us.
Have legal review it. We're having Ivrea look at it.
Yeah.
Obviously procurement's gonna look at it, this committee, Joe and his crew, right? Does anybody have any specific questions now that you would like to ask?
Yes,
Okay,
very much. Yeah.
great.
Mike, please note that we never seem to get this right. Somebody's got to change it. Reading is not located in Essex County. Okay, we've been trying to get this changed for ages, it seems, but
We're changing the county name.
yeah, well, let's move the county. It's in Middlesex County. So in the background where we says Reading is located in Essex County.
That's my bad.
Yeah, I would like to talk about MBA and WBA participation. Mike, do you know what the minimum required by law is? What are the parameters here? Is that anything you know?
So they do change from time to time. Right now, what we're showing is MBE participation goals at 6.6% and WBE participation at 15%.
Where did those numbers come from is my question.
Those come right from the MSBA right now. That's based off of, that was in the template, if you will.
Are those negotiable?
So those are the state minimums for designer services. So we can always go up from that. Typically, you're not able to go down. These are goals. They're not requirements. They're goals.
Okay. All right. Well, if we can't go down, I don't have any further things to say. I think they're too high, but that's.
Can I make an observation that Boston and Cambridge have the same requirements, and it's good that it says goal, not requirement. Because if it's a goal, you just have to show good faith.
Yes.
Try to achieve it, whereas a requirement's a completely different animal.
I mean, the reality is that anybody that works for any company that's going to be involved in this design process is a professional company. All their employees are going to have degrees from universities. These are not downtrodden minorities by any means, and we really shouldn't, in my view, have any requirements in this at all for designing buildings, but that's just my personal view, because I've seen too many problems with it. But if that's the minimum by state law, I have no further comments.
The only other thing I would say, just in relation to this, one of the things that we've seen more recently is we've also been talking with the designers about providing workforce reports as well, similar to what contractors would do, which is providing information on how many women and minorities are actually working on the individual teams as well. So again, there's some goals for that as well that we're working towards.
Mike, these goals are based on the companies.
Not the individual people, right? Is that correct?
There's two different ones. WBE is a minority.
Business enterprise, MBE. WBE is the women business enterprise. So when we're talking MBE or WBE, we're talking about companies owned by either minorities or women. Then there's also workforce requirements, workforce goals, which that doesn't matter who owns the company. Those are just, what percentage of the workforce from that company is either a minority or a woman or both.
Right. And that's what I was getting at. These goals are, if the designer is going to bring in other companies, they have those requirements to bring in.
Either minority-owned companies or women-owned companies, different from construction where,
Yeah.
That's
a big problem in the industry, because the architect looks around for, in order to comply with the 15% or 6.5%, 6%. They say, I'm going to have mechanical engineers going to be a woman, landscape's going to be a woman, and stuff like that, and it distorts the marketplace globally. I'm not talking about this specific project, but it's proven in my experience to be a very bad thing. But
and these are,
never mind.
yeah, these are state requirements, and
Yes,
we,
if they're state
and they're
requirements,
state goals, I should say.
Yes.
We really don't.
Yeah.
We really can't influence them unless we want to increase them. We can't
Yeah.
decrease them.
I would certainly not recommend increasing.
Well, I think again, to be clear and make the distinction, and Mike, can you confirm that the word goal is MSBA, is not an edit that we made?
That is correct. That's actually, that's actually right from the state, if you will. It's never a requirement, it's always a goal.
That's correct.
So it's not a hard and fast requirement that we have to achieve. It's a nice to have.
It is a nice to have, but if they don't meet it, then they have to provide documentation showing.
That what efforts were made to try and meet those goals. They can't just say we didn't try and we didn't meet it. They've got to show an attempt to make it.
You have other questions, John?
Well, there's a list of project objectives which you have in there, Mike, and two of them are, well, the last one is site selection. I'm not quite sure what that means. What are we talking about there?
So, sorry. So we highlighted a couple of those just maybe to have this discussion. So,
part of that OPM kickoff, and I would concur with Carlo that I thought it was great information for us. It was great to kind of get to know some people and meet them face to face a little bit and actually see the building and understand the complications of working within the current building that we have there. So it was great. And what we tried to do is take from that information some of the key objectives here. So identification of community concerns that may impact the study. So obviously we want the designer to not only listen to us and listen to the teachers and the educators, but the community as well. Confirm enrollment projections. Some of the questions we had or comments that we had was, do we think pre-K to 5 is right, or should we consider some other configurations, and kind of reconfirming those enrollments is something that's important. So again, having somebody that understands that process. Development and evaluation of options for the site. Is there interest in studying options that address all of the elementary school space phases? So in other words, are we looking to just replace the existing population at Killam, or are we looking to potentially adjust that population to add an additional pre-K or 2, things of that nature? Is there some overcrowding in other parts of the district that we would want to address here? Obviously Northeast Collaborative High Performance, which is New England CHIPS or US Green LEED for schools. We have to meet at least one of those, and that's almost just a general requirement now. Not almost, it is generally a requirement now that we have to meet one of those. The other things we heard at the meeting was consideration for net zero energy or net zero energy ready. And I would maybe ask this committee what their thoughts are on that, if we want to make that stronger or weaker, include one or both. And then finally, site selection is, are we going to look at potentially other locations around town? Or are we going to just focus on Killam and that one site? And I think during the meeting, there was some discussions, some small discussions about maybe considering some other locations. Obviously, we don't have a lot of options in town, so that's something that we have to understand and look through in a thoughtful manner.
Thanks. John, I'm glad you asked that question.
I'm surprised to see site selection on there. It's the last item on the list, and I would hate to see this project spin their wheels looking at other sites. We have a site, it's in the district, and the other bullets that you've identified, in my opinion, are the long-term drivers for this project. And then I would suggest, as we heard from the MSBA themselves, that we will be eligible for 1 to 3% in additional reimbursement funds by aiming for the highest level of LEED or the optimized stretch code. So we're definitely looking for a designer who I don't know if they'll all be from Massachusetts, but we need somebody who understands that and who has been doing that and has things in action. Or near completion is what I should say. And I think we're past, I'll express my opinion, I think we're past net zero ready, and that is why Tom is here, and that is why RMLD is dedicating resources to work with us all along the way. Because what we don't wanna do is get to the end of our design process and then say, we should have just bitten the bullet, because that will torpedo our project, torpedo our budget, and it's not a good place to be.
I think that part of this whole design process with every aspect from every constituent in our town is going to be that checks and balances of what we're looking for and how much is it gonna cost us, right? So we'll be doing that with RMLD, we'll be doing that with our special ed group, with our teachers, with students in mind, with the taxpayers, and just looking to see what kind of items we want on our wish list and what are those items that are doable and how much they're gonna cost us, right? So it's gonna be that type of ebb and flow of how we may have different options at some point in time, but we're gonna have to come out of this design phase with a considerable chunk of the project to present to the voters and the taxpayers.
I just want to put a big, strong voice on when we talk about cost. Let's think about 50 years from now and what the cost is to life, to the planet, to the children that are going to be educated in that building. And we, as a committee, have to be strong advocates to make sure that we push this project to the edge. And I'm not just talking net zero, because that's kind of easy right now. I'm talking about trying to look at all of the building materials. Are we sequestering carbon in our building? Those are the things that we need an architect who can direct us in the right way to do. And I really take exception to thinking about money. I'm thinking about the globe. So I really want this committee to be very strong and lead this whole meeting and this whole design process, so that we can show we're doing the best we can for those students and this world. So I really get emotional about using dollars as the way to divide this. So I want to be careful about that. I want an architect who knows their stuff, who can lead us in the right direction. Because this isn't a building for tomorrow. This is a building for 50 years from now. And we don't want to end up with a building that we're saying, gee, why did we build this? The kids are sick, the environment is sick, because we haven't taken into consideration now the technology and the things that we can do to make this a really strong project. So, you know, I'm really, really strong about that.
Well, I think a lot of this stuff, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is baked into the design, is
Not
baked into the
necessarily.
MSBA.
I
Not
think what Nancy's
necessarily.
saying is that net zero is not.
It's not enough.
Not enough, and that we've got to think about the new thoughts that are coming out in the construction industry. Is the energy embodied in the materials we use?
Yeah.
It's something which a lot of people don't have in their mind because they think of energy efficiency is as, you know, how much gas do you use when you heat the building in the winter? That's not the whole story. The story is that how much energy goes into producing cement, that goes into the concrete, or how much goes into producing steel versus using wood, for example, just for examples. It's a new phenomenon coming up in the construction industry, being recognized more and more. And we need to be sensitized to that and ensure that whoever the designer is of this building understands these issues, not just net zero. Net zero is just a numbers game, you know.
So what do you,
Can I ask a quick question?
sure,
So given you know, kind of that sentiment, and what we're trying to do here is come up with criteria for submissions, you know, and applications. And because I think in the end, we'll use all of that as criteria for whatever feedback we provide as far as the ranking goes. What I'm most concerned with is, given that, what do we say here? What bullet points do we need to add to make sure that we can flush out in an application, in a submission, what, you know, exactly what you mentioned, because I think that's what we want to be able to use as our, you know, and again, we may debate amongst ourselves what's important, what's not important, you know, but I think what we want to be able to do is be super broad and getting as much information as possible so that when each of us looks at it, I like them because they talk to this. I like them because they're always on budget. You know, like, we'll all have our own opinions of that, but what I want to make sure is that we don't artificially filter information that we think is going to be important.
I think we need someone to present the options, right? They need to be able to present the options for us to decide what options we want. So, and I think Ed was getting on the same thing I was. Do you, and you may not, but do you have any edits to this? Or we can push it back to Colliers to see if they have any edits to that.
Well, one of the questions was site selection. Are we going to look at other sites or not? Are we going to waste our time, or do you think it's worth
Well, but
looking at other
if we
sites
put,
around
so
town?
just to take so if we have that bullet of site selection on there, aren't we gonna just want someone that says that they know, you know, like that they're able and have experience in doing that? Or are we saying, like, what is that actual, you know, what does any one of those bullets mean? Like, you know, like from us, you know, like it says site selection. Does that mean that we could still do whatever we want? But if someone says, oh, well, have you ever thought about this place here? And like, if they have the ability to be able to instruct us then I think that's, we don't have to listen. I mean, we can always say like, we're gonna do it on, the current site.
Can I ask Mike
So
a quick question?
If I can maybe add a little clarification specific to site selection. One of the questions I guess I would have is if we're going to put something in here, and we may or may not know the answer to this, so don't feel like you have to give the exact answer, but do we have other town-owned property within the district that would make sense, to consider? And if we don't, the next question is there other property available within the right district that could be available that might be owned privately that we would want to engage with a private developer or somebody who owns that and try and purchase that? I mean, those are the type of things. So if you said, hey, the existing site is just too small and we need to talk about eminent domain of taking land, then you'd want somebody who's done that before. And I'm not saying that that's where you want to go, but that's like the far end.
The conversation, I think, of site selection is going to be a very short one, if there is one. It's not going to be an eminent domain type of situation. We don't have a lot of extra land hanging around to be able to pull out of the air to put this on, so.
Well, didn't DNAP also already somewhat exhaust that by going through a variety of different scenarios at a variety of different existing town land and school locations?
Yes, they did.
Through the prospects of you could do this, but you could do that, but.
Yep.
And there was a A and a B and a C and a couple of subcategories of each one. If we were just wading into this, I would say I would value the opinion of a professional to take a holistic view at this from an outsider's perspective.
Like DNAP already has.
But an offer, we've already done that.
We've already done that.
We've had a professional, we hired a professional who's already sort of gone through that holistic review and crunched some numbers and done some conceptual citing and scaling. And between the condition of Killam, its age and history, and that study, I think Killam is our candidate.
I was just gonna ask if, Mike, you said that this process requires that we go through the addition, renovation, build new scenario for MSBA. Is there a requirement that we also check a box that said we went through a site selection process?
There is a requirement for a minimum.
And to your point, it might be a, 30-minute conversation with a designer once they're on board, or, presenting the information that you've already previously reviewed and said, our understanding is that there really isn't another logical site, but we'd like for you to go back and review the documents and come up with your own conclusion, and let them do that. So that might be literally the extent of the site selection. So what I'm kind of hearing here is maybe a little bit different than what I had heard during the OPM kind of kickoff here. And so I put it down there, and I didn't elaborate on it because I wasn't really sure it was something that was going to have a lot of legs, and it sounds like it doesn't. So I think from that perspective, we are going to have to do a minimum site selection. Everybody understands that. If it's not one of the key items, then I would probably just take it off of this list right now.
Remind me, for GNAP study, did they look at other options other than the school building locations?
It's been a few years, but I feel like they looked at a lot of
A lot.
different options. Yeah, I don't remember specifically, but they presented a lot of different options, and I thought that the consensus was pretty clear that it was Killam, the existing site. But again, it's been a few years, so I don't remember.
Because I know they had the different scenarios and what could happen at each of the scenarios of the schools, but did they actually look at other options in town? Not that there are many, but if any, but, or was it just part? All right,
You can pull options out of the air if you want to be, kind of stupid about this, I build on the cemetery and stuff like that, because nobody's getting buried anymore, they're all getting buried.
compost center.
All kinds of things, there's the woods there, but they're not really serious issues. I don't think we should spend a lot of energy thinking about alternate sites. Killam is a site that is in the school department's domain. It seems to have enough space on it. It's a little tight, obviously, but it's not like the middle of Chelsea.
right.
So I'm not sure why we should spin our wheels on site selection. That's just my view.
Okay, so it sounded like we want to take that bullet out.
I'm thinking ahead to how the owner's project manager presentations went and how we barely got them to communicate what we needed them to do. To John's point, I would hate to see them waste 15 minutes talking about site selection when we know it's really not going anywhere, has no legs. But you may want to hear more about, functionally, how they're going to address, how they've experienced solving pre-K programs in other districts.
Having a site selection bullet is not gonna knock out a designer, right? Having a bullet that says, we want you to look at other energy efficiencies may or may not knock a designer out.
No, it's not
Right.
good, it's not going to. It's, so here's the thing, we're gonna have to functionally, depending on the school department and the superintendent and you all, to functionally tell us, what do we need to do to serve our students? And what the building committee is going to help us do, along with the select board and the Climate Advisory Committee and town manager, is we need to build a building that we can afford, that will be good to the planet, that will be efficient to run and manage and last us 50 years. So I really see it as two tracks, and all of that, as you said, the pros and cons, we have to get to a budget. So there's really only two
But
paths.
Karen, I actually think Carl was saying was, if that's a positive. If there's someone that can't talk to, net zero or anything else, that's a good thing. We want it to be exclusive in that, so the things that matter to us that are in these bullets, if they can't talk to it,
We don't want
we don't want them. So I think that's, like, if it knocks somebody out, then that's probably a
It's
good thing.
understood,
Yeah.
yes, if it would keep them from applying, yes, I agree with you.
These bullets are to identify and to restrict the amount of, or the number of designers that could potentially bid on this,
I'm sorry, I misunderstood,
based
correct.
on what our needs are, so.
Yep.
So Mike, maybe we could tighten up a little bit on that piece of it and possibly by Wednesday.
I would add, consideration for carbon neutrality and sequestering, or something along those lines. Mike, you probably have better words than that, but I think that's an important piece to this. We have to go beyond net zero. That's not enough.
So we need someone who will be able to set out the options,
Correct.
right?
And
With-
understand
With
it.
the cost, with the
Correct.
options, with the
You got it.
scenarios.
Correct.
Is that doable, Mike?
I think it is. So what I'm hearing here,
I think this is a great conversation. I think you folks are getting it. Like, just to put it in perspective, let's just say, for example, we get 6 designers. My guess is that you're gonna get 6 good designers that all can do a very good job on an elementary school in Massachusetts. Maybe it's 5 out of the 6 are in that category, but odds are all 6 are gonna be good designers, because that's what, we see a lot of very similar designers here. What we need to do is find out who's the best designer for your district. And to your point, when we do an interview or when they do a submission, they have a page limit on the submissions. We have a time limit on the interviews. So what we're trying to do here is give them a little insight on what are the most important things, what is gonna help set you apart from your competition. So I think from that perspective, we want to be clear as we can on this. What is the most important thing to you? And hopefully they get that, and maybe the designer that gets that the best is the one that's the best fit for you.
if that makes sense. So what I'm hearing, I took the site selection off.
I changed consideration of net zero goal to be either net zero energy or net zero ready. Consideration of carbon neutral. Again, we can work on those words. We've got a few days here to kind of expand those, if you will, or refine those a little bit. But if there's other goals that we want to consider, we can certainly do it. I had a district a while back that looked, for example, at Passive House. Ultimately, they decided that they wanted to use some of the Passive House goals in things of that nature, but to try and do Passive House in a school was going to be very difficult. But it didn't mean we couldn't take some of those best practices that you might do in a Passive House with getting air infiltration down as low as possible and things of that nature. If we want to put a target EUI in here, we want an EUI of under 30 or under 25 or something like that. That kind of gives them a sense of where your mindset is and where you want them to be.
And Mike, I think generally, not speaking for the group, but just for myself, I think trying to identify the designer, and a lot of this will have to do with sub-consultants who specialize in sustainability.
Yeah.
But a designer who is most versed or has the broadest experience in all of the various criteria and standards for efficiency in healthy buildings. LEED is one, well is one, fit well is another. Passive House has to do with the tightness of the building and the envelope and infiltration. but you also get into embodied carbon, and there's any number of other things that are important. And unfortunately, in a design process, those options almost have to be provided à la carte, and they also have to have a life cycle cost behind them. Because some of those things they're gonna be very expensive upfront, but when you look at them over the lifespan of the building, you'd be an idiot to not implement them. So that would be my suggestion, is try to come up with language that casts the widest net over all of those different sustainability programs, so that we get as broad a feedback from those designers. But I think it's also the life cycle cost component of that is very important. And being able to quantify that and provide some ROI for us, because the ROI is really what is very important when we're going to the town for funding, to say, yeah, it looks like a big number. That big number helps with reimbursement, and that big number pays for itself in 6 years or 8 years or whatever the case may be.
I think that's a great point, and I think, you know, if we have a couple that we say are goals, you know, maybe the net zero is a goal, maybe carbon neutral is a goal, maybe some of those other ones are, you know, things that we want to be, you know, under consideration. You know, like I don't want to make this all just on energy and on efficiencies, although those are very important.
We do want to look at other things as well, but I think the more that we can get in there, the more broad, the more information we can provide with them. And I think you're spot on with the life cycle analysis. Everybody does it, but it's becoming a larger and larger part of the discussion, because we are going to, looking to all electric and getting to these net zeros, and that return on investment becomes a much bigger part of that discussion when you're getting into these systems that are a little bit more expensive up front, or maybe a lot more expensive up front, but provide a lot better return in the long run.
Can I ask Mike one more question?
Sure.
One thing that isn't on here, and I'm just wondering if it should be on here, is a goal of this project should be to maximize our reimbursement. Are we looking for designers that have the insight on how to do that? Should they be talking about how they were creative, or is that more your role?
So I think that that's something that
is kind of understood, that everybody, they all understand that we want to minimize the cost and maximize the product, if you will, but we also want to maximize our reimbursement. So I think we can put that in here if we want to, but I think that that's kind of an understood, meeting the educational program is understood. There's some of these parts that are just automatic, if you will, but that doesn't mean when we get to that interview stage, if we want to tailor some questions specific to that, just understand that we'll be asking those questions with the MSBA in the room as well.
No, they were helpful. I mean, so they're like,
Mike, we want to make sure that Reading knows that you go for LEED or the optimized stretch code, and you're eligible for 1 to 3% more reimbursement. And so, I'm going to take that cue from them, that they'll welcome that question.
Yeah, and just so you know, they have 1 to 3% on the stretch code. There's actually an additional 1% on doing better air quality as well. So they are taking it serious.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Mike, you had a highlight on insurance. Further on the scope of services, asking whether the standard $2 million should be increased.
That's correct. So just again, is there a standard within the town that would require something more than that, basically?
Have you had experience of taking project insurance? In other words, have the standard 2 million, and if the town wants more, they buy an insurance policy themselves. Insurance doesn't come cheap.
Right, so it's doing like an OSIP, like an
owner first insurance.
Yes, I mean, some projects have project insurance. You take out an insurance policy for the project, and then the individual companies that are in the project, they don't buy their own insurance. That's the way it's done on many big projects. But another way of doing this is to not require anybody to increase their standard insurance above the 2 million, which is pretty standard in the industry. But if Reading wants more, then Reading should be willing to pay for more by buying their own insurance, a supplementary insurance, if you like. Any,
I have seen towns do supplemental.
okay,
Like in an OSIP type situation, I am familiar with, I'll say, private owners doing that, where they may have multiple projects, like, say, when I worked at Northeastern University, because they had a large number of projects,
Yep.
and they were going to do it themselves. I have seen some municipalities consider it. It's usually municipalities that are doing a large number of projects, because with an OSIP, if you have one project and you do have a claim on it, it can really exceed your one project cost. Because when you have multiple projects, kind of like insurance in general, that there's profits there to be made long term, but it's over multiple projects. But you certainly could have a minimum requirement here, which is say the $2 million, and then have an umbrella project or an umbrella policy that's held by the town or something to that effect, if that's what we wanted to do.
yeah, I think that's a better approach. I mean, people think that insurance is free. It isn't. And
No.
insurance policy, the cost gets added on to a project cost. People just add it on as a number, and it becomes a part of the cost of the project. And
Absolutely.
I don't think people sometimes don't realize that. If we want more insurance, we should be prepared as a town to pay for it, is what I'm saying. We should not require the designers to take out some extraordinary amount of insurance for no apparently good reason. That's my view.
How do we take that comment to the next level?
I will check with legal on, so 2 million is standard. I'll check on what we have done with that. We do a lot of projects around town, nothing in the last 20 years to this scale, but we don't take insurance on a project by project basis. Like on water and sewer projects, the water tank, parks. We do that.
So if I can,
One of the comments in the gray box that we're looking at here, it says, the owner may determine, due to the complexity and risk factors associated with the project, a higher level. I'm going back, I think, when I was with my former company, we did a project in Brookline, and part of the school was literally over the MBTA tracks. So I believe we actually had a higher insurance there because we were literally building a building over the tracks, and there was that risk. So I don't see that we have something like that here at Killam. So if there's a town requirement to go above that, or a district requirement to go above that, then we would absolutely adjust accordingly. But if there isn't anything, I don't see anything in this project, at least at this phase, that would make me feel that we have a unusually complex or an unusually risky project.
Anybody else?
Anybody on remote have any questions? Sarah? Any of the staff? Okay,
Mike, what do you currently have in terms of available information on the existing building, et cetera? You have drawings and stuff like that? That was your next bullet item, I believe, there. Yeah.
so I think the things that we've identified.
Identified here, give me 1 second, let me just pull the email back up here.
That the owner should identify any available studies, drawings, surveys, photographs, and I can't read that, subsoil exploration reports of the proposed project, existing buildings and the site or sites. And I'm wondering what the town has given you so far. Maybe we've not given you anything, but we do have a lot of information on the existing building and site.
So what we've identified that we have so far are these 5 documents. We have the Killam HERA report, which basically tells us where we have materials such as asbestos or lead paint, things of that nature. We've got population enrollment forecast, we've got the educational questionnaire, which was done at the beginning of the process. We have the enrollment certification, and we have the master planning report. So those were all the documents that were provided to us either through the OPM process or through the amendments to that OPM process. And we're recommending that we would include all of those with this package. And I don't know that anything else other than these exist. If we had existing condition documents of the existing building, you know, the old drawings, if you will, we could certainly include those.
We do have a full set of construction documents of the existing building,
Okay,
including the original land and that kind of stuff. Those are available. And
okay.
if you need them, we should provide them to you.
Absolutely. I don't think it hurts to provide that. I know it seems like the consensus here is that we're probably, you know, leaning towards the new building option, but they do have to consider the renovation and the renovation addition option. And that would be prudent to have that information if we could do that.
Yeah, part of the existing site
Is filled. There used to be a pond on the site, or at least a depression, and a hill which was cut down and filled in. So, you know, there is some information, historical information on subsoil conditions or topography at least, which would be useful to somebody to have, the designers to have at least.
Absolutely.
Is that on a thumb drive?
Hmm?
Is that on a thumb drive, or what do we,
It is on a thumb drive, it's, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
you've got it?
I've got a hard copy of the drawing, I've got a roll of drawings.
Yeah,
I also have a thumb drive,
you
yes.
have the thumb drive, okay.
Okay. So that would be one more, that would be maybe,
Attachment K, if you will. What I should probably do is go through and actually identify this is attachment F. I can do this offline, but it's F, G, H, I, J, and I'll keep that one highlighted that we don't have, you know, need Colliers to get the, you know, secure this.
Is it helpful to have the GNAP document in there?
I wonder if the
Yeah,
junior,
because that has the sites that were studied and all, so that would be the other piece to it. I don't seem to find it.
Put the GNAP report in there, Mike,
No, it's on my other computer.
or
the
GNAP,
GNAP,
GNAP, however they pronounce it, yep.
the next item that that I had highlighted was identifying any services, basic or extra. So as we go down to the next section here, where did it have to, here we go. So we had all, these are, again, they're standard items. The two that we kind of highlighted that we wanted to maybe double check is, laboratory consultants. I don't expect that we're gonna have any, what I would call laboratories in an elementary school, but, you know, science curriculum does get adjusted from time to time. If we felt we needed somebody as an expert, it doesn't hurt to have them in there. But if we don't feel that we're gonna need it, then we wouldn't need the laboratory consultant. And then theatrical consultant, again, don't typically have an auditorium specifically, but we may have a cafeteria, and even with the cafeteria, we definitely have, you know, sound and audio and visual and things like that. So I think the theatrical consultant, I think I was leaning towards leaving in, but I wanted to ask the question. The laboratory, I was actually
Anything we might remove, but again, just wanted to see if there was any thoughts before we did that.
So should there be life cycle costs consultant in this list?
So we could add that,
This line 23
Yeah.
was sustainability, green design, renewable energy consultant. I actually added photovoltaic in there. So I want to make sure that they understand the process and what I found is photovoltaic is kind of a specialty item, even though we know renewable energy, sometimes they're not as familiar with the photovoltaic, so I specifically added that. But I think the life cycle, if we have that up above, I think that would probably be covered by this 23, but I can certainly add that in if we think it's important.
I think so
Rare to see the architect doing any of that.
Right.
Quite often, your MEP designers will have the wherewithal to do life cycle cost analysis for major equipment. From a whole building perspective or from a renewable energy perspective, typically be your sustainability consultant.
Right.
That would do those types of upfront costs versus life cycle costs contributions. Tom, I don't know if you have any insight into that.
Well, my only comment is if you mentioned photovoltaic specifically, maybe geothermal should be in there as well. I mean, they're all renewable energy sources, so how far do you stretch that?
I think a sustainability consultant, maybe with knowledge, working knowledge in PV, ground source, other, most sustainability consultants have the wherewithal to look at the spectrum of available technologies and systems.
It's really that you want someone with expertise in the systems that enable the building to be net zero,
Yeah, so
however you say that.
to your point, I mean, so, and we're having discussions about the batteries as well, and creative discussions about batteries, so could we really get a good consultant who can, going beyond just the basics to really, what can we do with what we have today? Yeah, so do you think it's worded correctly that we'll get somebody who's really good at this, or just a generalist?
So there's two kind of areas here, just remember we have.
One area up above, which is we're identifying the key items that we want them to focus on. This one here is really more specific to the actual consultants themselves, so that we are expecting them to hire a landscape architect, an electrical and lighting designer, if we think the sustainability green design, I added photovoltaic just because it sounded like, that was something that we definitely wanted to consider here. So I found most sustainable people know a little bit about photovoltaic, but maybe not as much. Karen, I think you were just mentioning batteries. That's something that is becoming more and more part of the conversation right now, on-site storage, things of that nature. And quite honestly, as we get into this, there's probably not a lot of designers that have done like, say, 50 buildings with on-site storage, but they might be doing some right now, and they're learning as they go to a certain degree, because, we're getting better technology every day. And I think the key that we're gonna, what I'm gonna probably recommend as we move forward here is you have that cutting edge, and you want to be on or just behind that cutting edge. You don't want to be out in front and be the guinea pig, but we want to have, the advantage of being, right at the forefront there.
Your earlier question about, the laboratory consultant and the theater consultant. Does it make sense for us to cross-reference that against what the Killam Elementary School educational profile and the elementary school's master planning report? Like if there's some consistency there, then could that dictate that, or is that just something you need our opinion on?
No, I think it's a good point. I think
It's really maybe more of those two items specifically are maybe more questions for the educators, for the superintendent or the principal or maybe both, to have a conversation. Do we, what is the expectation for science? I don't expect that it's having, laboratory level science in a classroom at an elementary level.
Like, would a makerspace fit into that category, or separate from laboratory?
I'm sorry, would what?
A makerspace type area, more of that like STEM side, or completely separate from laboratory?
So I don't think so. If we're talking a space where we have, say, 3D printers, and research areas and maybe even tools that, you know, people are building with wood or things like that. I think a laboratory consultant is really coming into play when you're potentially maybe mixing, you know, chemicals in a chemistry type situation. And do I need acid waste, or do I need, you know, do I need natural gas for Bunsen burner? Like, are we getting to that kind of level that we need specialty items in a classroom and not just a hand wash sink, you know, or something like that?
Personally, those usually don't mix well with elementary students, but can defer to others on that too.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's why I highlighted the whole thing there, thinking I would probably delete this, but I want to ask before I do. The theater one I highlighted just to bring up that, you know, if we weren't planning on doing a cafetorium or something, or maybe you say we are, but we're not really ever gonna have, you know, the Christmas play here because the high school has a fantastic theater and we're going to go to the high school whenever we have a play, something like that. You know, if we're only needing it for assemblies and stuff like that, and you're not going to go to a platform with lighting and stuff like that, maybe you wouldn't consider the theater. But most elementary schools have a cafetorium. You're going to be doing things with the population, the students, while they're there during the day, you know, from time to time. And so I would probably leave the theater, which is why we didn't highlight the whole thing. We only did the beginning of it.
So Mike, why don't we,
If the committee's okay with it, why don't we take those two items out? I'll touch base with the superintendent and the principal again, and then if we want to put it back in, we'll put it back in. Sound good?
So I'm kind of making the updates as we go.
Here, I'll resend this out to everybody tonight. So what I've done is I crossed them out rather than remove them. That way they're there, you can see them.
perfect.
Mike, just a follow-on question. How many times have you seen a response that actually names somebody for every single one of these categories? Because I'm just thinking, and I'm looking at John across the way, and I'm wondering if as a prime designer, would you really ever go this deep and list by name every person, every sub-consultant that you could conceivably use? Or would you wait until you actually won the job and then bid out the sub-tier consulting to a number of qualified firms?
So what I would say is that
By putting the names or putting these categories in, we're asking them to name them. So let me just show you. This is a project I'm doing in Webster. This is one of the architects that had did it, and so you have Dora Whittier is the prime, but they actually list all these other items here. Sorry, I had a little noise going on in the background here. So they actually do list all the all the consultants that they have, and you can actually, we were talking MBEWB earlier. I see some of the highlights there as well.
Yeah. Greg, it says in this little box that failure of an applicant to list a team member may result in elimination of the applicant for consideration. So I think they do have to list somebody.
Well, just even on that example that Mike gave, there were 31 numbers, but there were only about 15 on the page. So like not all 31, were
Maybe they do
listed
both.
chronologically or sequentially, or.
Maybe there's a civil engineering firm that does other.
Yeah, so just to finish that off, if you look in the next page.
So this was a higher level. When you actually get down into the next page, they actually list all of them. So you can go through and find all the different ones. 1 through 31 are all listed.
Mike, could you adjust the list so that it kind of groups
consultants or firms together, the kind of firms that would work together. In other words, architecture, structural engineering, HVAC, electrical, that could be a group. Whereas data communications and environment and library sciences, or whatever it's called here, that's another group. Get it, rather than what looks to me like a random list, get some rational organization of the list?
This from the template, from the MSBA, just so you know, it's what, you know, what was, on the template, so it is what the architects are used to seeing, or the designers are used to seeing.
Yeah, it doesn't impress me, let's put it that way, because there are, you know, you've got site surveying down, it should be near civil engineering as far as I'm concerned, or landscape architecture, and the security consultant, I don't know where that should be, but it's,
Can't you organize them by CSI at least?
Right.
traffic engineering. What's traffic engineering? What are we, traffic consultant? Do we need a traffic consultant?
Yeah, you do.
Probably.
We do?
Yeah, you absolutely need a traffic consultant.
Yeah.
Every time we do anything this town, we need
Is that a consultant?
Yeah, it is a consultant.
Civil engineer can do it.
Boondoggle to me, but there we
Off
are.
the record, that is the school with the most traffic, aside from the high school.
I thought the superintendent does all that.
So,
Okay, all right, if this is an MSBA list, okay, but it seems to me it would be, if I was doing it, I'd make a much more rational list, let's put it that way.
I have no doubt, John.
You have no doubt, yeah,
That's not up for debate.
yeah.
So, any other questions? So feel free, so Mike, you'll send us, send Fidel a new one and he can get that out to the committee and updated. And then
that's correct.
if people can get their comments back to Jackie and Fidel on or before Wednesday, that would be great. So then Mike can keep on his timeline.
Just a quick question for Fidel and Tom, maybe. So as it relates to this request for services, as it relates to the attachments that Mike mentioned, which were now like F to K or L, does this need to be edited? And I'll pick on Tom versus Fidel, even though Fidel's in the room. But is there anything that we need to edit in the background or in those bullets that coincide with the elementary master plan? You know, like, so are there more things that, or has this already kind of gone through your hands? I guess is my question.
I'll say that we've looked at it. We will continue looking at it. But there's nothing here that is a shocker. I guess I'll say that. I mean, all of the attachments we have. I don't see an issue with wrapping this up by Thursday.
So I guess I'll be more direct with my question. So I haven't seen the elementary school master plan. Does it make sense for us to look at that plan to edit this document, or is that going to be done by someone else?
So when we say the master plan is the GNAP report, right? So when we were saying about the GNAP report, it's basically what we submitted to the MSBA as part of this process, which was in I'm looking at it right now. It was in April 15th, 2021, and it kind of outlines, you know, that GNAP as part of the GNAP as part of the submittal process that got us all into this, right? They looked at essentially, you know, the different options of consolidation into different schools, into different sites. So earlier, when you were saying the GNAP report, this is what was referenced.
So the elementary school master planning report is this report.
That's right.
So, and I know we talked about this on the 9th, but if we're looking to solve broader things than just, you know, so if we're talking about pre-K, if we're talking about, you know, alleviating, you know, space that might exist in other schools within the district, where is that held, and is that something that we should put in here?
Yeah, so it's in there. I mean, I will say that you know, if building a new Killam school wasn't the proposed solution, we wouldn't be here, right? We will probably rehash all these conversations again, but they were already had when it was developed, this process, right? And I'll send this report to the committee, but in this process, they looked at essentially, you know, could we consolidate Birch Meadow and I think Wood End, right? I mean, and what does that do? Could we redistrict schools, right? I mean, I'll share just a couple of slides from that. Actually, yeah, Mike sharing it. I mean, it talks about it really talks about that, right? Like you know, a view of what the options are, and as part of the original submittal, it was still determined that replacing the Killam school was the recommended step.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah, so the one thing I would say on that is, once we get a designer on board, we can have.
Absolutely ask them to consider multiple options. We've got to be a little careful during that designer selection process, because we've already committed that this is the project that we want to look at. If through that design review, we come up with another option that is something that we would want the MSBA to reconsider, we'd have to bring that back to them with some supporting documents. But we don't want to go too far down that path that, hey, we're going to change the enrollment and everything. But if we talk to them at the beginning there and say that that's something important to understand, their familiarity with it and how they evaluate it, then hopefully they'll present that in their initial presentation to us. So we're not necessarily asking those as detailed questions during the interviews.
That's good counsel, Mike, thanks. I'm trying to understand our operations, yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
And I think that was Karen's point from earlier too, is why have these people spend some of their showtime, presentation time on some blurb about site selection when we've effectively already done it.
Yeah. And we will, when I send out the
update, we'll make sure that we include all these attachments. The only attachment I wouldn't include right now is K, because I don't have it. But we have attachments F, G, H, I, J, and we'll include that. And just so you know, A, B, C, D, and E are MSBA standard attachments. They are they're at the bottom of the list, the package here. They're not your attachments though. Looking through it, if you can take a look at the schedule here, the MSBA was asking us on construction and substantial completion stuff for specific days, and I didn't feel that we were at that point yet, so we kept it more generic to spring and summer and fall. If people look at that and feel that those dates are substantially off, we could have a discussion on that. We already talked about this section here. As far as the committee specifically, and then the 3 people that would be part of the committee in general, do we need hard copies, or is everybody comfortable with an electronic copy? I've just got to confirm from the MSBA how many hard copies they want and how many electronic they want. But if we're distributing those out, it seems like electronic more and more is the way that it's done. But if people want hard copies, let's certainly do that.
I'd like a hard copy, please.
Okay. So is that maybe 2 hard copies, one original for Fidel and then one for Carla? Or do we want to just do 3?
Three's fine.
So I just noticed at the bottom of the proposal still has a prior procurement officer's name in there. Okay, good.
That's where I was going next. So 3 hard copies in electronic plus MSBA. So the next question is, first and foremost, it sounds like we maybe had the wrong name here, but we as your owner's project manager, we can actually accept them for you if you want, but if you would prefer to have them delivered to the town offices or something like that, then we can do that.
Fidel looks like he wants them. I don't know, Mike. We may defer to him.
I will check in with our procurement officer, right?
Okay. So we'll leave that highlighted and then, we'll have that. The other thing that we put in here, we took a look based off of the timing. We wanna have the site walk, far enough after the people get the documents so that they've actually read into them and they can come with questions, if you will, or, you know, with an understanding of the project. We're not so far off that any questions that come up there that we can't answer them, basically. So we proposed the date of the 26th. Again, we can be flexible on that. I proposed a time of 3:30, figuring that the school would be done for the day and the students, for the most part, would be gone. But if there's any sort of after-school programs or things like that that might interfere with that, we can do it a little bit later, or maybe a Wednesday is better than a Tuesday or something like that.
So let's,
if you can take a look.
let's ask Lindsay, is that September 26th at 3:30?
So we said September 22nd at either 12:30 or 1. Extended day will still be there, but it's only a couple kids, so I don't think that will impact it.
So we, you said September 22nd?
I think that's the Friday.
That is a Friday, that's correct.
So Mike, you're gonna update that to the 22nd.
And what time do we want, new time, did you say?
12:30 or 1 would be when all students are gone. Or most.
Are we better off saying 1 to give
Yes.
a little more time?
Yep. Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mike.
Do we need to vote that you'll represent the board there, or is it just assume the chair will go?
We did it, we did it specifically for superintendent and town manager because our town charter says that in order to be a voting member on the committee, you need to be a resident.
Okay.
So that's why town council said just double check.
Okay, good.
Okay, we'll move on to future meeting agenda items. Any recommendations? So should we go through our next meeting? We don't have anything on the books unless we're just gonna do the 3rd. September 18th. Is that good? At 7 o'clock? Should work. Great. How about if we could go to approve the 8-7 meeting minutes? It's in our packet on page 17. Does anybody need a moment to read it? Was it you good, Karen?
Yeah.
Do you want a motion?
Motion to approve the Killam School Building Committee meeting minutes of 8/7/2023 as presented.
Second.
And we will take a vote. Sarah?
Aye.
Kirk?
I wasn't here, so I abstained.
Greg?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
John?
I abstain, I wasn't there.
Karen?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Carla? Aye.
Hey, Carla, this is Pat. Just wanted you to know I've been here.
Oh.
I got in a little bit late.
Hi, Pat, you wanna vote?
We don't have to.
Aye.
Thank you.
Right.
And welcome.
Still voting.
You have any comments, Pat?
I do not.
All right, great. Motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Sorry, just one other quick question for you, sorry. If we're
Meeting on the 18th, that's gonna be after the RFS has already been released, if you will. So, we're looking to submit the RFS on August 30th. And then we're gonna be looking to put the ad in the central register on the 7th. And then it'll be appearing on the 13th so that people can start getting those packages prior to the 18th. I don't have any problem with that. I just want everybody to understand that we, you know, between now and the 30th, we'll take any comments, we'll add those in, and we would submit that to the MSBA. I don't know that you need a vote on that, but if you wanted to vote something to that effect, then we would submit that. And then again, I don't need necessarily a vote, but just an understanding from everybody that contingent on getting approval from the MSBA, we would be looking to put the ad in the central register on the 7th and then releasing that prior to the next meeting. So it would be on the street before the 18th.
Okay, well, we can take a vote that.
This is our understanding of the schedule if you want, that's easy enough.
So I will say that a vote is not necessarily needed. You didn't officially vote to release the RFS for the OPM. You're more than welcome to, certainly, but a vote is not needed, not legally required.
Can we get a copy of the schedule, Mike, that you outlined? I don't know that you sent it to everybody, but if we could, it wasn't in the packet.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
So the application would be due to the MSBA on October 19th.
Yep.
Our meeting, sorry, I'm off. Let's temporarily schedule our next meeting for September 18th, and we'll figure out, what an agenda would look like if we were gonna have it, and we'll get back to everybody on it. Okay?
Okay. Great. Do you wanna entertain a motion? Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Do a roll call. Pat,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Kirk,
Yes.
Greg,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Carla, yes. We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.